Came across a good article the other day from Raptors, shout out to you, on 5 Pascal Siakam trades that they need to consider. So that's the inspiration for today's videos. We're going to go through those trades and we're going to see which one of those they actually do need to consider. What's up everybody? Excuse me. It is JJ Buckets and I've told you what we're doing in today's video, so just before we fully hop into things, just the usual drill, make sure you're leaving a like on the video. Helps the algorithm out a ton. I do really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Plus, if you plan on doing any responsible sports betting in the near future, just make sure to check out my link in the description below. The first one here is not too dissimilar from the trade that I talked about last week, potentially with the Blazers. It has a little bit more caveats to it though. So in this case, the Raptors would be getting Shaedon Sharpe, they would be getting Jusuf Nurkic, Anthony Simons, and the 3rd overall pick. On the other end of it, the Blazers are getting Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. So for the Blazers, I think this makes a lot of sense because, I mean, on top of getting Siakam, who's a proven, ready-made, second option next to Dame, you're also getting OG Anunoby that's going to give you tremendous value as a wing player, I think, in that system and along those two guys. So for the Blazers, yes, you're giving up, your pick plus whatever else, Shaedon Sharpe, who has potential, Anthony Simons, etc. But you're getting a lot in return. So for them, I think I like this one, although based on the comment section from the last video, I don't think I know what the Blazers like, according to Blazers fans, so don't quote me on that. For the Raptors side of things, I think this one really depends on how much you believe in Anthony Simons, and there is a little bit more intrigue here, and I guess a little more nuance to this trade than there would have been to the one that I kind of talked about a little bit more last week. Is obviously, because you're giving up OG in this as well, now at that number 3 spot, you're better positioned that, if for whatever reason number 2 ends up being Scoot Henderson and you no longer have him on the board at number 3, you're now in a position to take Miller, who's still obviously a fantastic prospect. Just my own personal preference, I like Scoot better, but yeah, like you can still take Miller with that pick, which obviously you've now created spots on the wings that need to be filled so he can come in and fill that role. And I think this one really honestly depends on how much faith and belief the Raptors would have in Anthony Simons growing into a, like a reasonable, like borderline all-star level player. If they have faith in that, then I think this trade isn't too bad whatsoever. But if Simons can't amount to that level, I guess, of a pro, then this deal probably wouldn't be worth it for Toronto. Next one here involves the Houston Rockets, and in this case it would be Toronto sending Pascal Siakam and Gary Trent Jr. to the Rockets and getting back Jashante, Josh Christopher, Jalen Green, and the number 4 overall pick. So if you're Houston, obviously Ime Udoka is coming in. There's been reports that they're looking to kind of put themselves more in a position to compete. They're looking for stars. They're probably going to try to bring in somebody in free agency and then thus trying to bring in somebody via trade, which is where Pascal Siakam comes in. You also get Gary Trent Jr. out of it, who's going to be, I'd say, a really good role player beside, a unit like that. So I think that would be a reasonably good deal. Whereas on the other end, if you're Toronto, you get a couple of guys that maybe you could see as role players for the team with Tate and Christopher. And then obviously the big appeal of this is Jalen Green, who obviously the Rockets are reportedly not against moving, so you take that. And again, somebody that has plenty of upside in this league and in the right situation could really turn into a star. Maybe Toronto is the right situation for that, and maybe Toronto is where he does turn into that star. So not a bad haul in terms of getting him back. And then on top of that, you also get the number 4 overall pick, which I think is really enticing because in this case, you'd be imagining that obviously Wemby goes first and then Scoot and Miller go 2nd and 3rd in whatever order. And then you're sitting there at number 4 with that Houston pick, and all of a sudden, I think you're probably staring down, and I want to say I got the pronunciation right here in terms of the first name, but you're probably looking at Amen Thompson from the Thompson Bros, obviously in the draft. I think he would be a really good fit in terms of some of the things he can do on the court, both in terms of the vision and in terms of the scoring. He's a very enticing prospect and I think would be a really good fit for the Raptors if, they're kind of trying to do that like soft reset in terms of like the young guys and stuff like that. You're looking at Thompson, you're looking at Jalen Green, you still keep OG Anunoby in all likelihood in this scenario. You got Scotty Barnes, you got Jakob Poeltl. I think Toronto actually makes out really well from this deal. So not against this one. Not against this one whatsoever. This next one here is when it starts to get a little more clouded, I would say. So the next one is the New York Knicks, and it would be Pascal Siakam plus, the description says, 1 first-round pick going to the Knicks, whereas the Knicks are sending back RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, I believe it was Isaiah Hartenstein, yep, and 3 first-round picks. So I think from both sides, this one's a little bit quirky, if you want to use the word. Pairing Julius Randle and Pascal Siakam together is interesting. I don't necessarily know if I love that fit together because I don't think they're super dissimilar in terms of the players that they are. So having them on the court together in the same lineup would be interesting. So I don't know if I love that one if I'm New York, if I'm being honest. On the other side of things, well, I mean, again, so New York could obviously move off Randall if they intend to, but yeah, that's a different conversation. So if you're Toronto in this case, RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, like you're getting a good pick haul in terms of 3 first-round picks. Obviously, you're expecting in that case, I think, New York to maybe kind of eventually get to the point that those picks are going to mean something, because respectfully, I don't know how much I love RJ Barrett as a pro. Like obviously there's still plenty of room to grow, I believe, and maybe he just needs a different setting, but from what we've seen of him to date, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. Like he's not a bad player by any means, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if I love him as kind of like the centerpiece of this trade, which obviously he would be. Toppin is what Toppin is. Not particularly excited about him either. You know, a good role player, maybe a good starter in the future, but not super excited about that return as well. Hartenstein is cool. That would give you a really good bench big option, but I don't think the Raptors are lacking in terms of like, you know, Jakob Poeltl, you have Precious Achiuwa, you have Chris Boucher. Obviously, further moves can be made past this, and Hartenstein is a solid player, but in terms of the trades that we've seen to this point, this one's a little bit more meh. The next one here involves the Golden State Warriors. So Toronto would send Pascal Siakam to the Warriors, and the Warriors would send back Jonathan Kuminga, Jordan Poole, Gary Payton II, and 1 first-round pick. If you're the Warriors, I think adding Siakam is kind of a no-brainer. Obviously, there's been talks whether or not Draymond Green's going to remain with the team, so if you're looking to replace him, Pascal Siakam is obviously a fantastic option, and you know, I think he fits right into the Warriors. I think he's a good player in that scheme for that team, so I think in that regards, for the Warriors, I genuinely think this is kind of a no-brainer, respectfully. Whereas on the other end of things for Toronto, I'm not so sure. So first of all, you're eating that massive Jordan Poole contract. He just came off a really bad playoff run. So how much do you believe that that was kind of just, you know, one bad kind of stretch, and you know that this season wasn't necessarily reflective of who Jordan Poole can be as a pro in the league? I think a lot of this trade depends on that. I think getting Jonathan Kuminga is really cool. Obviously, we haven't seen that much of him, I would say, as a pro so far, and he's definitely a guy that needs a lot of coaching and development, but does have some relative good upside still. Gary Payton II, good role player. I think you take those. And 1 first-round pick is 1 first-round pick. I mean, depending on when that first-round pick is and how long you expect Steph Curry to still be doing his thing, that could be a really good first-round pick, or it could be a little meh. Just overall, looking at this trade, not a huge fan. Like, just that Poole contract, I think, is the biggest thing that just turns me off this deal, and I understand that you need that Poole contract in there for, you know, the money to work and all that stuff, but overall, just not particularly high on this one. And the last one here is with the Charlotte Hornets. So Pascal Siakam goes to the Hornets. In return, you get, number 2 overall pick. You get Gordon Hayward, you get James Bouknight, you get Kai Jones, you get 2 first-round picks in the future, and you get 2 second-round picks in the future. So from the Hornets side of things, this is interesting. I guess at this point, you know, maybe you're wanting to put yourself in a position to compete for a playoff spot, and, you know, give a little more incentive, I suppose, to LaMelo in terms of, you know, wanting to stay in Charlotte. Obviously, you know, he's still on his rookie deal and he's still a young player, but I guess it's never too early to start investing in putting a team around those young players so they want to stay with your team moving forward. I guess that would be the appeal of this for Charlotte, I suppose. On the other end of things, for Toronto, it's a big haul. Obviously, that Gordon Hayward contract, that's for the money to work, and I believe that should be expiring relatively soon, so it'll give you some cap flexibility in the future. The other, obviously, like the big selling point of this trade, because obviously you have future assets, you have young guys that, depending on how you feel about them, are either cool or just, you know, filler for this trade. But the number 2 overall pick is the big selling point here if you're Toronto, because obviously after Wemby goes off the board at number 1, if you're Toronto in this scenario, you have a chance to go get whoever you feel is the second best player in this draft, and I think that's quite frankly huge. Again, you can go get yourself Scoot, you can go get yourself Miller, depends really on who you think is the second best player. Maybe even take a Thompson brother if you're really that in love with them, you know? Like, that's definitely the appeal of this trade, and obviously for Siakam, who's a little bit on the older side, and obviously his contract situation is coming up in the not so distant future. It's not a bad return by any means. It's still a little murky. Again, I don't know if I'm in love with the appeal of it on Charlotte's side reasonably, because I mean, yes, like on one hand, like Charlotte's a small market, and how many free agents are you realistically going to get to come to Charlotte to play with LaMelo Ball? So I suppose that's kind of part of it. So getting Siakam in a trade and pairing him alongside LaMelo Ball is a good move. I don't know if it's a great one, especially because obviously you can use that number 2 pick to go get somebody to play with LaMelo as well that, you know, could be really damn good. And if you're Toronto, I think this is fine. Again, I think the number 2 pick is more than good enough to kind of carry this trade. It's not the best one of like this group of trades, but it's not a bad one. And those are the 5 trades. So what do you folks think? Which one was the best trade included there? Let me know, comment that below. Other than that, folks, that's pretty much been me for the day. If you're still watching, I will just reiterate the usual drill. Make sure you leave a like on the video. It does a huge difference for how the video performs, and I do appreciate it every time you folks do it. Thank you so much. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Other than that, it's been JJ Buckets, it's been real, and I will see everybody next time.